Hello everyone, Ceri Griffiths here, or as you know me, Ceri the Crafter. Now, I've been going through some of the comments. Obviously, it's an ongoing process trying to catch up with comments. And a comment came across my feed the other day that went, Ceri, you've missed something, and it's a bit of an oversight on my behalf, so I'm quite happy to address it. And actually, it's a really good idea, and it's a very good video to film. You guys seem to really enjoy my gel printing videos, along with all of them, but I mean, gel printing seems to be one that a lot of you are really intrigued with. And a lot of you have been inspired to have a go yourself. And I always recommend that if you're going to start out with a 5x7 gel plate. It's small enough that it's not going to be overly expensive, although it's probably going to sit somewhere between maybe about 16 to 20 pounds, maybe about 18 to 22 dollars American. Canada will be different, Australia, wherever you are in the world. I would always say look out for bargains. Also, I have in the past gone onto eBay and found gel plates in the auction section. What I would say is always check before you start bidding on a gel plate how much you could get one brand new, because with those auctions it's really easy to get sucked into adding an extra bid, and before you know it, you spent more on a used plate than you actually would have done on a brand new plate. However, I have in the past picked up a few damaged gel plates and actually cut them down in size once I've got them, and it's worked perfectly well. I wouldn't really recommend cutting gel plates. I've done it once or twice. It works, but for me, I'm not comfortable cutting a gel plate, and I can never get it as precise as I want. But that's just my OCD playing. Anyhow, I usually recommend buying a 5x7, and then some of my subscribers will go out and order a 5x7. But then I've never followed that up, and the comment was, Ceri, can you show me what to actually do with the 5x7, because I'm now nervous to use it. So I went, right, that's a really good point. So I've ordered a brand new 5x7 gel plate. I'm going to take you all the way from package to basic print, okay? Now, what I'm going to say before we even start this video off, as far as flipping to the overhead and you watching what I'm doing, is I've never been taught to gel plate. I have learnt by experimentation, watching other YouTubers, other artists at work, and play. And I would say play is the most important thing about it. What I'm going to try and do in this video, and it's going to be at least an hour long. I'm guessing it's probably going to be about an hour and 15 after I've edited it. I am not going to be able to cover every single aspect of gel printing. I'm going to give you some basics. I'm going to explain like different types of paints. We're going to do some basic printing, and I'm saying basic because that's why I'm keeping it. There are so many talented artists on YouTube that do gel printing far beyond my imagination. So I would say is once you get comfortable with the basics, do a bit of a search. Now, my gel plates of choice are Gel Press. You'll see their logo because I'm going to be unpacking this. This is a Gel Press plate, as are all of my other plates. As far as I'm aware, I've got about 11 or 12 different gel plates in various different sizes, even a couple of small shaped ones. It's taken me several years to build up that because, as I said, a gel plate is not the most, it's expensive. You can make gel plates. I've never done it. I've never looked at it. I've never looked at the process. I want to buy something that I know is manufactured, that is stable enough for me to not worry about it. My original 5x7, which is this one, and we'll talk about why it's this colour. I have had this gel plate for years. I can't actually remember when I bought it, and it's still going strong and it still does a really good job. I will, however, explain why it's the colour it is when we get there. So anyway, just know that I'm only speaking from my own experiences. I recommend you experiment and play. I'll give you as many hints and tips along the way, but when you finish watching the video and you've got your basics down, do internet searches. I'm not really going to start spouting out every single person you should follow, because there are so many different varieties of people doing so many different things with so many different talent levels that it would be wrong of me to try and point one of them out over another. I may refer to PM Artist Studio and their lives only because I'm one of their designers. Also, they do 4 lives a week. Usually at least 2 of those will contain gel printing. And they're also part of a community. They have a Facebook group called Makers of Mixed Media Art and Artists Group, which I'll put the link in the description box. And there's a lot of gel print people on there as well. There's a lot of people within that group, because it's not just gel printing, it's several different mediums like glass, pottery, ceramics, fabric, all of that lot. You will find there's lots of very supportive people there who are willing to help out. So there's always something to shout out for. Also, you can always ask me a question in the comments. Just know that with the amount of comments I receive per video, I'm playing catch up on a regular basis. So you may not get an answer for probably at least a month. I'm working my way down that list, but the list keeps adding up and up and up. So some questions I probably haven't got to for months. I'll get there eventually, guys. Anyway, enough of me gossiping. I want to spend more time actually playing with the plate. So I will open this on screen with you. We'll go through the whole thing. We'll talk about storage. I'll talk about brayers. I'll talk about paint. We'll do some basic printing. I'm not going to use mark making. I'm not going to use stencils. Just literally putting paint on it, taking paint off it. That's what we're doing in this video. It's absolutely basic. If you're someone who already gel prints, I doubt whether you need to watch this video. This is purely packaged to print, and it's purely set out for those who have requested, and absolutely beginners. Let's dip our toe in the water type of video. So no further ado, let's flip this camera around and open this package, and we can start playing. Key to gel printing: play, play, play. You'll learn so much more by playing. Okay, see you in a second. Okay, so here we are with the package as it arrived through the mail, and we're going to start working on it. Now, just a word of warning, this video is going to be probably quite a lot of talking along the way, because there's things that I can't just demonstrate. I need to explain the reason why. So bear with me. Feel free to fast forward, skip to bits that are of interest to you. This video is basically just a resource. So, right, open this package up. Right, is a receipt in here? I shouldn't expect so, because I know they emailed me one. Right, let's get that over to one side. Okay, so Gel Press. This is the company I order from, so if you need to recognize a logo or how it's actually printed, you will always have one of these covers on here. Within this somewhere, let's see if I can find it. There's normally a Gel Press website address on here somewhere. Anyway, we'll keep looking. Right. This container that it arrives in is what's called a clamshell. Okay, so it opens up quite easily. And this is what a lot of people will continue to store their gel plate in. Let's take it out for a second, because we'll talk about that in a minute. So, clamshell. Now, depends on how long you're doing it as to how long this will last. I used my clamshell for quite some time, but then it started to break along here and pieces started to split. As soon as it starts to split or fall to pieces or crack, get rid of it and change what you store stuff in. Now, you can store your gel plate in almost anything, to be honest with you. I have these plastic boxes that I use. There is a video on how I store my gel plates. I'll put that in a link in the video below as well. I use these. It doesn't have to be airtight. It is this. I know some people use like the Tim Holtz tins. Other people put them in a biscuit tin. I would say probably don't put it in a cardboard box, because that will continue to absorb any moisture that's in the air within it. I don't know why I'm saying that, because I've never actually tried it in a cardboard box, but you could. Worst case scenario, you could even slip this into like a sandwich bag and seal the sandwich bag. Downside of that, though, is, let's pull in the old one to show this. If you have something resting or pressing into the surface of your gel plate, it's going to mark it. And we'll refer to that in a little while anyway. So I would say storing it in a plastic bag is probably not the best idea. But if you have no other option, maybe that's the good idea for you. So, okay, so I look for something that I can just basically close. Whatever you choose, you will see umpteen different storage devices when you look at other people's videos. So that's what we're calling a clamshell. Okay, inside here, right, if you go online and you look up Gel Press, find their website, you will find there's loads of videos linked to it, like all different artists who are actually on their design team, shows you how to use it. There's going to be inspirational stuff going along the way. It does give you some basic instructions here. I would say I don't necessarily follow instructions. So hopefully that was all in screen. I don't necessarily follow instructions. There are a few guidelines that I try not to deviate from, however. Let's put that one to one side. Let's pull this one back in. Okay. The surface of your gel plate, we'll look at the brand new one in a second. I'm using this one because it shows up better on a white background. The surface of your gel plate is soft. I mean, you can press into it. As you can see, it's a pliable thing. It's, how could I say, it's like very soft candy, like one of those fruit gel sweet things. It's probably not going to tear. But I'm not going to yank it until it does, because I'm not going to ruin my old gel plate. The things you need to be aware of is when you store it, if there's anything on the plate or under the plate and you rest, say, let's use an example. Say there was something like biscuit crumbs and there were biscuit crumbs stuck on here, and then you stored your gel plate. If you come back to it later on, say about a week or two's time, and you took this off and you brushed the biscuit crumbs off, you will have little tiny indentations in your gel plate. Now, over time, those might work their way back out. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because of this, and we're going to address this now. So let's put this to one side just so I can use it. When your gel plate first arrives, it's going to have these acetate pieces on them. Okay, there's one on the front and one on the back. Once you've removed it, save it, but don't use it for storing your gel plate. I personally don't put them back in here. The reason being is these plates were put on by a machine and they were on for manufacturing. If you try to re-put it on and you trapped air bubbles, as you can see there, air bubbles underneath, after a couple of weeks, those air bubbles will actually make a mark in your gel plate. They will leave an indentation. So when you're doing prints, you'll find then these are where the paint doesn't actually pick up. So once you've taken this piece of acetate off, put it to one side, that's really useful, good quality acetate, use it for maybe other craftings. Now there's a piece on either side. Now, I personally take both of them off, because I have found if I don't, the thing slides around while I'm trying to work on it. Some people, however, leave the one side on until they've used this so much that they've decided they need another surface. Okay, so know that there are different versions. I personally take it off because of the nature of the gel plate, it will stick to a flat surface, and that's what I want. So this again is another piece I can get rid of. Well, put to one side. Now, when it comes, you've finished working and you're going to restore your gel plate and you want to put it back into your clamshell, I would not recommend just putting it straight back into your clamshell, because once again, as you can see here, you've trapped bubbles. Bubbles make marks. Potentially. So what I normally do is when I finish working with the gel plate, I get some copier paper or any paper that's not got a pattern or an embossed design on it, and I just sandwich my gel press between two pieces of paper. I'm using copier paper here. Make sure there's no air bubbles, because you don't want air bubbles, because guess what? We're going to end up marking our plate again. Why has that got a ripple in it? That's probably good folded up. And then what I normally do is I then put that in my clamshell, and seal my clamshell up. Now I would normally cut my paper so it fits within the inside of here. Okay, just so you know. And as you can see, all of my other gel plates are actually sandwiched between copier paper as well. The copier paper I use is an inexpensive copier paper. I use copier paper for one reason only. As far as the quality, it's cheap as chips. Okay, what you'll find is over time the paper may absorb moisture out of the plate. If you've conditioned your plate, and there'll be a video link below on how I take care of my gel plates, there's a natural mineral oil within this product. You will find that it may come through and stain the paper. If you've used it, like if I was to put it on here, it would probably leach out some of the colour that's actually soaked into the plate. It's fine, it's not going to mark your plate. But when it gets to the point where, say you've got this sort of effect and you've crinkled the paper, if you store this upside down, what's going to happen is over time this could start marking your plate. So anyway, just letting you know, that's the quickest version I can do with reasons as to why I store it in copier paper. Copier paper is inexpensive. Replace the sheets whenever they're starting to look marked or marred. Okay, right. Let's address the question of why one is one colour and one is another, right? We've addressed the clamshell, we've addressed putting papers on it. Okay, let's do them straight or it's going to send my OCD through the roof. Now, this is a brand new gel plate. You've just seen me open it. It's crystal clear, absolutely what you'd love. This one is several years old. It's only ever been used for acrylic paints. You can use a lot of different mediums. You can use watercolors, you can use acrylics, you can use acrylic inks, you can use alcohol inks, you can use a lot of different things on your gel press, your gel plate to actually make prints from. If you're using just acrylics, as I said, it's going to take several years for it to get to this stage. It's not inhibited in any way the way the gel plate works. It's just discoloured it over time because the natural pigments within the acrylic paints have actually soaked in. If you use acrylic inks or you use alcohol inks, it's going to stain far quicker. Don't worry about it. The staining will not damage your plate. It'll be totally fine. If you've got crusting left on your plate, like there's a little bit there from where I've been gel printing, I think I was using this yesterday actually. There's bits on the side. They're not that much of a problem, but I tend to keep a very clean plate. So at the end of every session, I use a damp cloth. Now I use just a regular damp face cloth. This one's stained, it's not dirty. And I generally just wipe the excess paint off my gel plate. Lots of artists don't. They will let it build up because you'll get really nice crusty areas around the edge of your gel plate, and then when you pull images it lifts previous stuff off. I don't personally like doing that because then if I store this plate, those crusty edges could embed into the plate and actually damage my plate or leave an impression. So I'm not going to go into cleaning and caring because there's already a video done. Link is in the box below. Let's put that one to one side. So we've got our brand new plate. Now, what if you've watched, there's already a mark on it. Where's that mark come from? There you go. If you've already watched some of my videos in the past, you will see I put my gel plates onto something that looks like this. This is an acrylic plate, a plexiglass piece. I normally go on the internet and I'll order them sometimes hardware stores do them because this could be used for window replacement. You could use anything you want like that, but that's not necessary. The only reason I put them on there is because I make lots of videos. For me, I can pick my plate up and move it around, take it back and forth. I usually have 3 or 4 gel plates on at the same time. This just makes it easier. Also, if I'm using a clear one, I could potentially, once there's paint on there, pick this up and use it as a stamp block to position something on another plate. These are basically just little non-slip feet. I went to my pound store. These are little stickers, one side rubber on the other. So that's one, and I cut the other one into 4 for the corners. That's primarily there so that when it's on my surface, it doesn't move around. I like having the one in the middle because that, to me, if I'm doing a really thin layer of paint, I know that if I can see this black spot through my paint, then I've got a really thin layer of paint, just the way I work. If you like this idea, it doesn't have to be clear. You could get maybe a chopping board, or you could get one of those hard placemats for the dining table, something like that to put it on, so it doesn't have to be clear. You don't actually need it at all because it will stick to a surface. Now, when you put your gel plate down on a surface, I like to have a surface that's like, it's smooth, it's not fibrous. I wouldn't put this onto a tablecloth or something fabric because it'll pick up all the little fibres and you'll spend so much of your time cleaning the fibres off or trying to pull the fibres back out of the print you've just made because you didn't realise were there. This is a really large chopping board. It's a bit of a kitchen surface that I use to put most of my stuff on. It works. You could get a glass placemat and put it on there. I've seen some artists, they've just got a sheet of plastic and they sit it on plastic there. Or if you've got a desk protector, you can buy those on the internet. They're usually about A2 size, I think they are. And they're basically a silicone plastic sheet they put down to protect your desk when you're working. So anything along those lines. We are not going to use any of that gadgetry today. We are literally going to put this on this surface, and I'm going to actually needs to be in the middle anyway. So I'm just going to put this down. If there are any air bubbles, I do try to press them out with my fingers. Not 100% necessary, but that's because I know that after I finish using it, I'm going to lift this plate off, give it a wipe down, put it between its 2 pieces of paper and back in the clamshell. Okay, you cannot print, well, I suppose you could print, let's ignore that. You can do different techniques, but the most popular one is using a brayer. My favourite brayer is a Speedball. It's a soft brayer. It feels quite firm, but it is regarded as a soft brayer. Okay, now, this is a brand new one because I thought I'd like to have a new one as a spare for me. But just so you know, this is a brand new one and how it looks. This is the one I've been using for years. This is what yours is going to end up like. It's going to have splashes of paint all over it and everything. Now, I always clean my plate at the end of a session. I always clean my brayer as I go along. Now, what I would say I do is literally, once I've got paint on the brayer, I'll get any old paper, this is just magazine paper, and I will brayer the excess paint onto a surface. I usually save all the brayer offs because they can produce some really nice backgrounds for collage and for other things. And also that spare paint, I don't want to be throwing out the bin. So once that off, I will then come in and I will wipe my brayer down just to get the excess paint off. Now, I like Speedball because if I press it, it comes unclipped. Now, as you're working, you're going to find a build-up of paint will occur around the edges here and around the edges here. That doesn't normally bother me. I don't ever clean it off until it gets to the point where it's so thick I can pull it off with my thumbnail. Try not to do it over your plate. You don't want crumbs on your plate. But as you can see, you can pull it off the edges. It needs to be thick so you can get your thumbnail underneath it. And that's how I clean the edges of my brayer. I would say there are people out there who do not clean their brayers, and it's a personal choice. And what happens then is the brayer ends up with a thick skin of acrylic paint on it, and you can then peel the entire skin off around your brayer and take it off. And people like to do that. I've never done that because I'm a bit of a neat freak. So let's move this out of the way because I don't want to get any more crumbs on it. So if you have a load of paint on here, apparently there is a way of soaking this, and I can't remember the product you soak it in because I've never used the product. You can soak it for a few days and it will soften the paint back, and then you can take it off. I can't remember what it is. It's some sort of washing detergent they use in America. So know that you might find people refer to that. See, I'm obsessed now. I can see this around the edge, and I'll take it off. Okay, stop, Griffiths, that's not what this is about. But as you can see, you will expose, once that's peeled off, you'll expose the natural edge of the brayer. Right, let's take that out of the way. Now, as you're using your brayer, you're going to get this build-up of paint. Now, the reason you need to keep an eye on that is, over time, this build-up will reach the edge of your brayer and start making marks on your brayer. Okay, for me, what I do is if it's getting near that, what I'll tend to do is I'll come in and I'll take a craft knife and like that bit there, and I will literally gently run the blade down and just clean that off. That's basically all the housekeeping I do. Now, obviously, if you're using a sharp blade, please be careful. I also tend to clean up this area here because this is where you can get a build up on the edge of your brayer as well. But that's all the maintenance I tend to do when I'm looking after my brayer. Okay, so, and then when I clip this back on, everything should be running nice and smoothly. And as you can see, I've taken the excess off there. So that's how I take care of my brayer. Let's put that to one side because we're not going to use my old brayer. We're going to use a brand new one today so you can see exactly what happens. So, right, let's clean that off there. Now, there is a side effect from doing gel printing that you are going to become very familiar with very, very quickly. And that is, first of all, you'll get obsessed with gel printing and you will make hundreds and hundreds of prints. The big problem with that scenario is, while you're working, where you're going to put all these gel prints to dry, because you can't stack them on top of each other, because if you do, they'll stick to each other. I've got an old shower curtain. I mean, this was from my pound store, so it's a really cheap shower curtain. I basically lay this on my carpet because the floor is the biggest area I've got here that I can lay stuff on. Beware if you've got cats and dogs that walk over the top of it. Small children are likely to crawl and run right over the top of it as well. However, if you've got the ability, put a shower curtain down. I choose a shower curtain and not a bed sheet because a shower curtain is supposed to be moisture resistant. So if there's any wet paint on the underside of my print, it's not going to soak through into whatever's underneath and mark the floor. So I've got this. I've had this for, again, years and years and years. So we've got our gel print. Now, we're going to start doing some printing. And I would say when you very first start out, grab one of those freebie magazines that comes through the door and cut it up into sizes that'll roughly fit on your plate. Because the first 100 prints you make, there's probably only going to be 2 or 3 in there that you're going to really love. However, the process of learning comes through experimentation. So have that to hand. Also, have some white paper, copier paper around, because as we're practicing with magazines, you could inadvertently have an effect that happens which is called image transfer, and hopefully it'll happen when I'm doing this. It should do. And once that sort of happens, what I'll say is quickly grab that image and stick it onto a bit of white paper. You could use it for collage in the future. Once it's fully dry, you could go in with inks. It's the incidental images that you may love to use. So let's talk about some paint and show you what they do. Right, there are a huge amount of acrylic paints and inks and stuff out there. I'm just going to touch on a few of the fundamental paints that I use and I know about. If it comes in a tube, it's normally classed as heavy body. So if I take the top off this and give it a squeeze, the paint will come out holding its form. It's called a heavy body paint. I like using heavy body paints. My personal choice, I do use most paints. There is another option, by the way. These are regular. there is a paint option that says open. If it's an open paint, and it literally does say the word OPEN, and you'll find that a lot with this brand called Golden, open means it's got a really long drying time, and that's meant for very dry climates or very dry studios where your paint will dry way before you get to take it off the plate. And it extends the working time, but it also extends the drying time. You'll hear those referred to. So that's heavy bodied. This is high flow. Now high flow, I'm going to put my finger over that, is, can you hear that? It's a liquid. It's a very highly pigmented, but it's a liquid. This one happens to be transparent. I'm going to show you each of these in action. I'm going to do this one first because there's an effect that will come up on this plate that I'd quite like you to see if it works on a brand new plate for me. Next to those, you've got fluid acrylics. So this is high flow and this is fluid. Now fluid does shake around, but if I put a drop of this on here, it will hold its form like a raindrop sitting on here, but it's slightly thicker and consistent than the high flow. Then you'll have what I call craft paints, which are the ones I would say, before you go into buying expensive paints, get some really inexpensive acrylic paints from your local craft shop, your local stationery store, and play with those, because paints cost money, definitely cost money depending on the brand, and you can get some truly amazing results using craft paints. Okay, you don't need hugely expensive. These are slightly thicker than I would call a fluid. They're still liquid, but they're sort of midway between a fluid and a heavy body. At least the ones I use are. And then you've got paints that come like these. Now this is a Dyeing Reevely Dilutions paint for Ranger, and this is sort of sits between a fluid and a craft. It's a lot looser. It's quite highly pigmented. You will find it will dry quite quickly. I will say Dina Wakley actually has her own brand as well. And I think Tim Holtz has got paints as well. Just know that as you're working, find the paints that work best for you. So let's actually stop the drawing and actually look at something. Right, now the reason I want to do a high flow acrylic straight away is this is a virgin plate. Nothing has been done on here. It's got a thin coating of possibly oil on the surface. And what this will do, it means it will bloom or it will break apart. Let's put some on here. That may be a little bit too much. Always make sure you wipe the noses of these because they'll bubble and burst on you. So I'm coming in now. You don't hammer down. You're literally, I almost call it flicking. I'm letting the weight of the brayer do the job for me. And I'm moving back and forth. After I've got a reasonable coat on here, I'm going to take the brayer away, and I normally wipe this off onto what I call a brayer off sheet, which is a spare piece of paper to one side. Now, as you can see it if I lift it up maybe. As you can see, the paint is beginning to separate. Some people call that blooming, some people call that crazing. And the reason that's happening is because the natural oils on the surface of the plate are resisting the fluid, high flow acrylic, because it's almost like water and oil. They don't mix. So that's why. Now, if you blow on it, some people blow and it'll get more of an effect. The longer you leave it, the longer they'll separate it. But also the longer you leave it, the more likely is it's going to be drying. It's a fun effect. Some people like it. I'm just going to lift it off here because I don't need it. It was purely for a demonstration. So now, when you're doing print work, there are things called quick pulls and slow pulls and long pulls. Slow and long pulls are probably the same thing. A quick pull is just what I've done, is I put the paper down and I just pick up. I'm going to pick that up with a bit of white because it's got some interesting effects on it. You never know, I might actually use that for a bit of collage later. So, if you put paint down or you put your medium down, you put your paper on top of it and then you pull it back off, it's called a quick pull. There are artists out there who will build the design on their plate, they'll put the paper on there and they'll leave it overnight and then they'll pull it the next day or even a few hours later. The trouble is, the longer... There, let's clean the plate. See, to me, that's an interesting thing. I'm not sure what's going to happen to it, but I'm going to put it to one side. Now, let's look at paper. Paper is made up of different layers, and one sheet of paper is made up of many layers. So, if this was one sheet of paper made up of all the layers of the fibres within it, if I put the paint on this side, it immediately starts absorbing. So it's absorbing into this one, and then it works its way into the next one, and the next one, the next one. If you do a quick pull, you're reasonably safe because it's only on this layer, it will lift off. If you do a long pull, meaning you've left it for several hours or overnight, it will have gone as far into this as possible. The moisture would have dried out, so it would have gone back to its laminated stage and you'll pull the print off. If, however, I put paint on here and I actually put the sheet of paper down, went to the bathroom, say, and came back and then decided to pull it, what would probably have happened is, because the moisture would have soaked into maybe the first couple of layers of the paper, when you pulled the print, the dry areas would pull off and the wet areas would stay stuck to your plate. So you need to make a decision whether you're going to do a quick pull or a long pull. Okay, just as you watch other people gel print, you will see what I mean. So we've looked at the high flow. Right, let's look at fluid. Fluid is, again, a liquid paint. But as you can see, it's on the surface, it forms a little cabochon, but it's not like this one where it's flowing. This one is almost like water, or maybe slightly thicker than water, but you get where I'm going with this. Again, brayering it out. I'm rolling, I'm not pummeling in, I'm not going back and forth all the time. I'm almost letting the brayer spin as I pull it back and forth. I will always have lines created by the edges of my brayer, so the last few that I do, I just pull a skim over the top. Now let's take another piece of magazine article. Now, in a few seconds, once I've shown you all the paints, I will show you what, how much paint roughly to use. So I'll put that on there. I'm doing a quick pull, lift it up. Right, that design there is actually what I was talking about an image transfer. And what I'll explain it at some point, but let me just pop that on there to pick it up. So, when it comes to magazine articles, and anything that is laser printed, the black here, the toner within that will resist the paint, whereas the unprinted areas will absorb the paint, and it's called image transfer. Now have I got one or two videos? I think I might have 2 videos on image transfers. I'll try and remember. There's going to be a long list of reference videos for you guys in the description box, guys. So you'll see image transfers done a lot, and they are great. They either work or they don't work. They are hit and miss. It depends a lot on the conditions of the plate, the conditions of you on the day, the quality of the print you've had done, the quality of the paper you're pulling it with, the consistency of the paint. There's lots involved, but just know that because you're practicing with magazine articles, see, it's transferred to there. So I've just got, basically, it's building up an interesting print, and it's cleaned my plate. Right, let's get rid of you because you're going to be transferring over. Right, let's look at this one now. This is the Dilutions one, which, as I said, is quite close to fluid. As you can see, it will hold that cabochon shape or the dome shape on the gel plate, and that dictates to me that it's a fluid and not a high flow. This, however, paint is designed to dry quickly, so if you're using it, just make sure you need to move with a certain amount of speed on your gel plate, because otherwise the paint's going to dry. Now, if the paint dries, let it fully dry and then put another layer of paint over the top of it and leave it for a few minutes, and then you should be able to pull that layer of paint and the paint underneath. Okay, if you see rippling on your paper which I can't lift it up, but there is rippling occurring, that's an indicator that the paper is being saturated with liquid. Okay, that's normally an indicator that you have too much paint on your plate. It's also an indicator that things could potentially tear the paper. So again, I've got a little bit of an image transfer there, so I'm just going to pop it onto the side of here. This will probably end up as a very weird and wonderful print at the end of it, but you know what, it is what it is. So I've lifted it up. See, I've just got an element of the print there. Image transfer can be really good. This is not about image transfer. It just happens to be an incidental thing we're doing. Okay, craft paint. Again, craft paint. With a craft paint, I would say always give it a good shake, because craft paint tends to separate. Now, craft paint is very similar to fluid. It will hold its shape, but it is more solid in its consistency. So let's come in, pop that down and brayer it out. Now I'm going to talk in a minute about how much paint is too much paint, and it's something you will learn over time. Okay, just know that that's the way that's going to go. Let's pull out another print. Let's pull this one out, pop it over the top. Just going to now smoothing it down my hand. Now, when you're smoothing stuff onto a gel plate, always make sure you smooth around the edges. The reason for that is because the edges seem to be the first place that will always dry out. Okay, so the more stuff you've got building up on the side, the edges of your plate, the quicker it's going to dry out. So there you go. We're going to do a lift, taking that off. That was an opaque paint. Again, I've got some image transfer stuff happening there with lettering. It's probably not going to be that exciting, but I'm just going to pick it up anyway, just so this one print keeps being built. Now, you'll note I didn't touch that side. Yeah, it wasn't much on there, because there's always a little bit extra on your brayer. You can always come in and do a really quick, this would be a secondary print. Some people, if you actually have made a print and there's stuff left on your plate, they'll immediately put another piece of paper down, and that will be called a ghost print. So remember, guys, this is just from my experience and knowledge. So I would consider that a secondary print. Some people consider that a ghost print. Okay, it's just utilizing whatever paint you've got on the plate. Right, let's get rid of that one, because that's going to get stuck. So I'm just getting rid of these to one side, just so that I don't put my hand in them. That's what I'm trying to do. Then we're on to the heavy body paints here. Now, the heavy body paints will take a little bit more time to dry on the plate, so you've got a little bit more working time. What else do I want to say about heavy body paints? I tend to like using heavy body paints. I get the best image transfers from them. I like the time I get to work on the plate, because they tend to dry slower. If you're using things like acrylic paints, not acrylics, metallic paints, I personally find metallic paints dry incredibly quickly here in Wales. It could be the brands I'm using, but just know that for me personally, I find acrylic paints dry faster than any other paint I use. Right, so I'm just coming in again, a quick pull. Taking the pull off, as you can see, we've got some stuff on here. I'm just going to pick it up, just because why waste it? It's there. So right, so we've looked at all the different consistency of paints. Now let's look about how much paint you should use or potentially use. So I've got the wording came off on that one. It's becoming an interesting thing. Let's stay with green. Okay, actually no, let's not stay with green. Let's work with another colour. What's this one? Olive green. Let's work with olive green. Okay. Now, whatever paint you use, you need to find what is your perfect working scenario as far as the amount of paint on the plate. Now, I'm going to put too much paint on this plate because I want to demonstrate to you what that would look like and the potential problems. So put the lid back on there because I'm notorious for knocking paint and squidging paint. Now, there's far too much paint on this plate. I can tell that from experience. And what it's going to do is, as I'm braying it out, I'm going to find that it's really hard to get a smooth covering. I'm going to get this sort of suctioning action. You can see it on my brayer there. That's translated there. The moment I put a piece of paper on here, what I'm going to find is the paper will slide around. That's an indicator that there's too much paint on there. Also, my paper, depending on its weight or its thickness, you could end up with rippling. When you take this off, yes, you've taken stuff off, but you've also got a large amount of paint still left on there. And the problem with that, as I said before, is you're just going to be wasting paint unless you start printing extras out. So I've got 2 off there already. And I've still got more paint. And there's more paint on my brayer. So it's a common mistake. Everyone will do it every single time someone starts for the first time. Even when I'm warming my plate up or I'm just starting to work for the day, I very often forget how much paint I need. I also work on a 12 by 12 plate very regularly. And when I swap from a 12 by 12 to a 5 by 7, I forget, and I always put too much paint down to start with. Well, there you go. Let's pick that up onto here. So as you can see, it's just one brayer's worth of paint, and I'm still getting more and more prints off this. Lift off there. So see, I'm still getting more and more and more. So just be aware that too much paint does a few things. It means you end up with more than you wanted, probably, of the same color prints. It also means that basically you're wasting paint because you didn't need that much in the first place. So when you reckon out of that one piece, I had this piece, this piece, this piece, the layer that went on there, and I had this piece. So all of those were off that one amount of paint. You don't need that amount of paint. Okay, so that's stuck all over the place. It's hard to tell you exactly how much you need, but always err on the side of less. Because even if I just put 2 little smears on there like that, you may think, oh, it's not really a lot of paint. Once you start braying it out, that paint travels around the plate and you end up with a really thin coating, which for me is preferable. So let's just pick up something that's going to pick that up. I don't know what magazine this was. Looks like Father Christmas. So see, I've got a really thin coating of paint on there, and that was all due to the amount of paint. But I can still brayer on here and potentially pick up another sheet. I'm using the white just so you can see how much paint was left on the plate. See, you still had all of that left on the plate. So just be aware, less is more, if that makes sense. So I think we've covered consistencies of paint, how much paint to use, the equipment, everything I was thinking about we were going along with. I think I've covered the basics. What I would say is have fun. That's what gel printing is about. That's where, for me, the magic happens. So let's see if we can have a bit of a play. Let's pull this out. Right, this is crimson red. Right, now we're going to do some absolute basics here, okay? Just so you see that you don't need a million tons of equipment. So this is basically, I wouldn't call this a craft paint, although craft paints are normally in these bottles. This is Arteza. I know Arteza is a good quality paint, but it is a soft bodied paint, not a firm bodied paint. So I'm just going to brayer this out. Not a lot of paint on there. That's what I was aiming for. I'm going to take the handle of a paintbrush and I'm actually going to just do some marks on there, and I'm going to come straight in and pick that up. Now, if you see someone doing something like that, it's called mark making. Literally, it's absolutely just called mark making. It's a great way to make unique backgrounds, unique unique designs without having to be worrying about, have I stamped, have I stenciled, have I done stuff like that. So as you can see, I've just got some basic there. Now, colours there, green and red normally make brown. For some reason, this made sort of a taupe colour, but you can mark mate, that's not a problem. You could also come in with other things. So where are we up to? Got some over there, right. Use some of the basic stuff you find around. So let's see whether I can find a bit that, let's use this bit here. I'm using the green because we had the green. If I was to take, let's see if I can find another colour. If I was to take, this is plum purple. If I put a little bit of plum purple on here, and I use this as my ink pad, if I brayer this out, then I'm going to just take some packaging. This is bubble wrap packaging. You've all got bubble wrap arriving around the place, and you lay it down. That's giving you visual texture. Also, this is what's called a ghost print. It's on the plate. Now, I can come in and I can lay this one over the top, and because the one underneath on the paper is dry and the one on the plate is wet, when I lift this up, it's actually going to lift that design off as well. See, now come back in, I'm going to see if I can pick that bit up there. So as you can see, basic mark making scenarios there. You could even come in, let's see if I get another colour on the go. Right, let's take some of this. I'm going to put a little bit of this on my finger, just a little bit, and I'm going to come in. I'm just going to basically be a child again and do some finger painting. I'm not trying to be an artist, although I think anyone who's making something purposefully is an artist in my book. So I'm just going to put this on here just because I want to show you something a bit later on. So we're just doing basics, guys, just doing basics here. Right, so I'll put that on there. Now this paint should dry reasonably quickly. So what I'm going to do, besides tidy up my workspace, is I'm going to come in now and I'm going to add something else to this. While it's drying, I can work on something else. Now, this is one of those scenarios where if I had my gel plate on another surface, and remember, doesn't have to be clear, could be a chopping board, could be one of those placemats for your dining table, could be the lid of a biscuit tin or something, or, you know, at Christmas you get those cracker boxes that are made out of plastic. Save the lid, you can always sit something on there. It means I could pick it up and move it around. Right, so I've got that on there. What colour do I want next? Let's pull out some yellow. Right, so I've got some yellow here. Let's pull in our bubble wrap again, because it's something you're all going to have. So I'm just going to this time put my bubble wrap, put my paint directly onto my surface. Now, obviously, if it's a good surface, don't be doing that. But I am, because this is my work surface. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to get myself, this is like an old store card, and I'm just going to smooth it out with my store card. And then I'm going to come in, I'm going to pick up that with my bubble wrap, press it down in a few different places, just so I've got something in the background to share. Now, I always have on the go lots of different prints. You will find that as you're working, you will generate so many prints. So I've got my store card here, and I can just smear onto these. I can just come in, really abstract, making pieces of what I call collage papers, but to somebody this may actually be the background for maybe a card that you're doing, a contemporary looking card. So I never waste the paint. You can actually come in and just pick it back up off the surface you've got it on until it's all used up, or you get to the stage where you need to wipe it up. We're just making interesting backgrounds. We are playing. I always have my damp cloth on hand. As I said, some people will use baby wipes. I tend to not use baby wipes. I'm trying to do my bit for the environment, which is why once a year I treat myself to 2 new face cloths. I usually get them, they're usually 2 for £1 in this country in the cheap shop, and I use them all year. And to be honest with you, at the end of the year, they're stained, like these are coming to the end of the year. They go in with my laundry. I usually put them in with a coloured load. I keep recycling and recycling them. I've got a drawer with some in now. Next year, I don't think I'm going to be buying any because I think the ones I've got will already do. Now, we've got that on there. I can tell it's not 100% dry. Okay, it will take some time to dry. So I'm just going to waft this while we talk about stuff. Let's use the gel press. Let's waft it with this. Now, I am drying the paint out. I personally wouldn't ever use a hairdryer or a heat gun on a gel plate. Definitely not a heat gun, because this gel plate could potentially melt and it could catch on fire. Depends on how hot your heat gun is, however. So I wouldn't use a heat gun or a hairdryer on it. I would basically do what I'm doing here, which is fanning it and letting it sit for a while. If you're planning to build up an image, by all means build the image up, but then I would say just leave it and go and get yourself a cup of coffee while it fully dries. That's one of the advantages of having more than one plate, because if I'm doing a gel session and I want to build up an entire image, so what I'm doing here is I'm building an image up that will then get pulled off, and that would be a mono print, as it's only pulled in one go. Now, when you actually start playing around with putting different visual textures and patterns onto a plate, you need to think backwards. So if this is the first thing I put on the plate, that's dry, and then I put another layer of paint over the top of it, that's the next layer of paint. Then there's the next layer of paint over the top of that, and so on and so on and so on. So basically I'd have 5 or 6 different layers of patterns and colours all stacked up on top. Each time it would have dried in between, so that when I put the next paint on, it doesn't pull the first paint off. But as your first image is there, when you peel this off, whatever you put on first will be the thing that's most in the foreground of your gel print. Okay, so if I use, for example, we did the green first, then we overlaid the maroon or the plum, and then we put the yellow. Same here. We had that sort of turquoisey colour first, then the plum colour came in, then the yellow. That was because I stacked the layers on top of each other. This one I'm going to do the reverse. When I pull it off, if I'd have wanted to recreate this, I'd have to have put the yellow on the plate first, then the plum, and then the green over the entire back of it. And I know getting your head around that way of thinking can sometimes be really difficult when you're first starting out. Okay, just know it's acceptable. It is what it is. It happens a lot. I struggle sometimes when I'm trying to work out a one pull print to find out which bit I'm going to do in which order. Right, I think it's almost dry. I'm trying to not pause the video because I don't really want to pause the video. So let's see, what are we going to pull this with? Let's make it quite light, I think. No, gold won't work because gold is actually yellow. Why would I do that? Let's do some pink. I've just got some generic pink here. Now, if you ever see me using a bottle that's got no label on it, it's because it's a bottle that's made up of, when my bottles of paint get to really low, I decant them all into the same. So I will put anything that's relatively pink into the same pink. I think I've got a couple of browns around there. There you go. Anything that was brown gets decanted into the brown. You could instead leave the little bit of paint in the bottom, put some water with it, give it a real shake, and then what you'll do is you'll create something that's a lot like a high flow acrylic, although what it is, it's like a watery wash. You can get some really lovely effects with it. Patricia from PM Artist Studio does that a lot and gets some really interesting effects on her prints. So that's something else you can do, but we're going to use that one, I think. Right. Now I'm going to be pulling this with white. So I've got my white ready. That's another thing. When you're working, have your stuff at hand. Have your damp cloth to one area. Have your clean papers to one area. Have your braille sheets to one area. Have your paints within arm's reach. Because as you're working, if you put the paint down, you go away and try and come get something and come back, you're going to find it's dried on you. So just be really cautious that drying time is paramount. Drying time also depends on the climate in which you live. So it's like Patricia and Mariah from PM Artist Studio. They live in Texas. So Patricia and Mariah's paints dry really quickly. I live here in Wales. It rains a lot. My paints have a longer working time. I'm sure Australia has the problem where they dry really quickly, whereas maybe in Indonesia, where there's a high humidity, or even Miami, say, high humidity, then you're going to find paints will take longer to dry. So it's a bit of each. So I'm just going to put a little bit of paint on here. I don't need a huge amount. I'm going to pull this print, and the word pulling in a print is actually the action of pulling the paper off the gel plate. That's my belief anyway. So I've immediately got that down. I'm going to give that a bit of a rub. Now remember, rub around the edges and the corners, because that's where it's going to dry first. Also, try to make sure there's no air bubbles under your paper. If there is, try to work them out. If you've got some sort of pattern on here, I wouldn't lift this up and try and put it back down again. Just try to work it out by rubbing it. Now I'm using my hand to rub this. As you become more and more proficient with gel printing, you're probably going to hear the word Baron. A Baron is a tool. Actually, here's one. This is my Baron. It's created to press things down. This is a handmade one, so it's not a cheap item, but it's unique to me and I love it, and it'll be with me and probably passed on to someone when I passed. But so there are tools you can use. I bought the Baron because I tend to get very dry hands. As I'm rubbing on paper, my hands dry out and I tend to get dry, cracked hands. So I tend to use a Baron. Also, I found with the amount of gel printing I was doing, I was beginning to get a few injuries in my wrist because I'm constantly doing this action. The weight of one of these Barons actually means that I don't have to do a lot. The weight of it's pressing down for me. That was made by someone called Anthony Cody from Cody Woodcrafts on Etsy. But you can use other things. You don't have to spend a ton of money on equipment unless it's your passion, and then maybe you do. Right. That's been sat there more than enough now. I'm hoping that the layers of the paper are not going to pull up and rip. So this is pulling a print. So there you can see we've made a really interesting background with some really plain basic techniques. Okay, nothing fancy schmancy there. We've made that. That would make a great collage piece. That could be a card front. You could cut that into 2 journal cards. You could back that on card and make a tag out of it. This is what we're planning to do. Basically, when you get a gel plate, you just need to play. I can't emphasize that enough. Just play. Never use a sharp object, okay? So if you want to do anything like mark making, I would use something soft and I'd use a light action to do it. Anything that's hard, I would not run that down there, because anytime you damage it, it's permanent. You can't get the damage out. Sometimes with those little nicks and marks and bubble marks, they will, as you feed your plate and condition your plate over time, then you will find that those marks may come out, but there's no guarantees. So the last thing I want to do now is I'm actually going to show you how I would put my gel plate to sleep. I just want to tear this down a bit. So I just want my paper to be slightly smaller. I am being lazy. I could easily have used a guillotine or a scissors. So what I want is, I want my paper, oh, it's pretty good going actually, the size of my gel plate or just slightly bigger than it. Now I've got little pieces stuck to this gel plate, and as you can see, I've already got a build up around the edges here. What I do personally, this is where other people will sometimes leave it, is I take my damp cloth and I just do a bit of what I call housekeeping. And what that does is it just extends the longevity of my plate. As I said, there are some wonderful effects you can get by having a dirty plate and keep on using a dirty plate, which pulls up layer upon layer upon layer. And some very well-known artists will do that. Like I know Seth Apner does it. He'll build up grunge on the plate, and then as you pull, you're getting layers and layers of crusted stuff off. It's just not the way my brain is wired. I can't do that. It would drive me nuts if I had to keep working with a dirty plate. So I've got my clamshell, I've got my gel plate. I'm just going to pop that in there. I'm going to pick this up, lay it over the top. Now, there are little tiny bits of stuff stuck to this. I can see it because of the white. I'm going to try and just get the last bit of excess off without being obsessive. I'm then going to lay my plate paper over the top, press it down, and then I'm going to seal my clamshell shut again. Now, because the clamshell is actually the same width as the plate, you can store this on its side, you can store it flat. What I would say is don't store anything heavy on here, because even though this is firm plastic, I can still press on this. So if you had a heavy weight sitting on here for a week or two, you could mark your plate. I quite like when they're in the clamshell to store them on their edge, because that takes up the least amount of room. When they've got to the point where, actually I'll just put my other plate by because it's done. Let's take that out of the way. When it gets to the point where the plate is actually no longer functioning, the clamshell is no longer functioning because it's old, I put them into these plastic boxes. As I said, it could be a tin. I don't store these on their side, because if I stored it on the side, they'd all press into each other. I don't think you can see that. It tends to buckle them. So I would now store these flat, which is why I like these really shallow ones. So I also don't stack my gel plates on top of each other in a box. I don't know why. It could be I'm just scared of marking the plates, to be honest. So guys, I think that's as much as I can say about those. So hopefully that answered the questions. We've covered where to put your gel plates when they're drying, how to make your basic plates, which brayer I bought. I said this is a soft speedball. There are umpteen brayers out there, guys. Let's see if I can just grab a few. Umpteen different brayers. I've got numerous. That's a really old brayer. All different sizes, shapes. I've even seen people using those like fleece covered small rollers for doing home decor with. There's lots and lots of options out there. By all means, what I'm showing you is not the be all and end all of all knowledge on gel plating. Okay, so once again, this is the brand I use the most of. What is the other one called? I think the other brand that I see most often, I think it's called Jelly Art. However, I know that Dina Wakley has her own plates. I don't know whether Tim Holtz has his own plates, to be honest, but lots of people have their own plates. Okay, so the thing to look for is look for gel printing plate if you're doing an internet search, or monochrome or monoprint plate. That's sort of where it is. I'm not going to put links into any of these because this is an obvious, it's a search whichever country you're in. If you search for gel printing on the internet or Amazon or eBay or any of those sites, you will have a load of stuff come up. There are tools, there are equipment. You can use stencils and stamps. You can use paint markers like acrylic paint markers like Posca ones. You can draw on your plate. Make sure that you're not digging in with the nib of your pen, although most paint pens are not hard nibbed anyway. There are so many techniques. It's an exciting thing to be able to work with. I love it. I'm very addicted to it, as you've seen. I make lots of stuff from my gel prints, and I make backgrounds for my cards and projects. I do journal covers. So hopefully that covered everything. I've tried to cover as much as I can, as quick as I can within the time I've got. I hope it supports you guys. Remember, any questions, you can obviously add those into the comments, but just be aware most of the answers to those questions are probably going to be in the videos I've linked below. And besides that, if you do drop a comment, give me some time to answer, guys, because I can't always get back to you as quickly as I would like to. So, I'm Ceri the Crafter. That's Ceri the Crafter. Until next time, bye-bye now.